Hello, welcome everybody to Crosstown On Tap. I'm your host, Cody. You can follow me on Twitter at Cody On Tap. I'm joined with my other host, Tony. You can follow him on Twitter at Tony On Tap. And we're joined by Socks On Tap contributor, podcaster, NWI Steve. First time I've really been on a podcast with him at all, so that's exciting. Fellas, how are we doing tonight?
We are doing fantastic, Cody. Absolutely fantastic. It's great to be back. Episode 2, Crosstown on Tap. Steve,
We made it.
we did. We got past the hardest thing, which is episode 1, and now we're here. And we've got Steve. He's injured. Unfortunately, he's injured.
Hey, yo, boys.
and he's ready to talk some Chicago baseball.
Yeah, we might have to break a little bit of news here. I may be having to go for a second opinion tomorrow relating to the incident that took place with the razor blade. The phrases major reconstructive surgery and amputation have been uttered, so I am trying to seek a second opinion here to see if we can save the finger.
Steve, I'm just glad we took the insurance policy out on you when we signed that contract, and I wish you the best. This kind of hurts things, as we head into the offseason when we need, you to be able to type, respond to Bob Nightingale, all those things. So we'll see what's going on, man. But the second opinion, you're going to have to let me know. You're going to have to let me know.
True to form, yesterday I heard Bob had tweeted that the bleeding had stopped, and then sure enough, today around 3 o'clock, it started up all over again. So, Bob strikes again.
Yep. It's a tale as old as time. Every time he says something, the exact opposite happens. It's just never going to end.
Can we get into that for 1 second? Because I think that's a neutral thing that we can start to establish some common ground between all of us as we talk about things. But, Steve, there was a couple instances this year with Bob Nightingale specifically, and one of them was the Field of Dreams game when we were sitting there, and there was like a Bob Nightingale tweet, something about Liam Hendricks, I believe it was, where he had interviewed Liam Hendricks and said something about how excited he is to just have the chance because he was on just a terrible little stretch of baseball. And Nightingale tweeted something about him closing it down. And I think I read you the tweet right when Hendricks was coming into pitch. And I remember you looking at me and saying, Anthony, why did you do that right now?
I think it was something to the effect of Hendricks saying, I just hope I don't come in and blow the game.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. I hope I don't come in and blow the game. And I brought that up to you as he was coming in from the bullpen.
Yeah.
And you were like, why did you even bring that up? Cody, have you had a Bob Nightingale moment like that before?
I'm sure there's been one with the Cubs, but I just haven't, there's not one that's ringing a bell in my head at this moment. I will say the one that I actually what I remember the most about Bob Nightingale, I guess it's not even really in season, but he's the one who broke the news about Tony La Russa being the White Sox manager. And that's just mind blowing to me because he's wrong all the time, And I couldn't believe it that he was the one. So, that for some reason that sticks out to me when I think about Bob Nightingale. But I guess as far as another team, he has a bunch of for about 4.5 months he had all these cold takes about the Cardinals, but then they got super hot in September and then lost to the Dodgers. But whatever.
As we like to say, not great, Bob.
Yeah.
That's just. Ugh.
Yeah, he's a different breed, guys. I when you think of blue check marks on Twitter, he's a different breed from the rest of baseball Twitter that are journalists, in my opinion.
Steve, I don't know why you haven't gone there yet, but not great Bob. Is that can we get why do we not have a not great Bob with Bob Nightingale's face on it GIF? Sportsnet yet.
Yeah, look, I'm not the GIF master here at On Tap. I think that's Schwartz's department right there. So I feel like we need to do that, and I'd like to give a shout out to AJ, as we always like to say, not great Bob. He's not Bob. He's not Bob.
Yes, my son is actually in the YouTube chat tonight.
Oh.
He wanted to tune into the show. He likes watching this stuff. because he likes baseball just like we do. Cody, I don't know if you've met my son, but Steve has, and yeah, he's a good kid. He's a diehard White Sox fan, and he hates the Cubs. And I think I'm raising him just the way that I should be.
I mean, I don't blame you for doing that. That's cool. I'm just glad he's a baseball fan. So many kids his age that don't even like baseball. So, it's cool. I'm all right with it.
There we go. So one of the things we wanted to get into, like before we break into some of this news stuff, but one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is one of the articles that Steve wrote just a couple weeks ago about a specific player within the White Sox organization who is very polarizing to the fans, who just, you either love him or you hate him. And I feel like there was kind of some similarities there with another player on the Cubs. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Before we do that, Cody, I know you've got some Cubs news to share. We'll comment on some things from a baseball perspective. We'll get into some White Sox news that we want to talk about. A couple of guys going up for some awards and on our team, maybe not on yours. But I'll let you take the floor, and then we'll go into the White Sox news, and then we'll get into the hot topic.
So I think the biggest Cubs news of recent is that they claimed Wade Miley off waivers. I don't know the technical term of how they do it, but the Cubs have Wade Miley now. The Reds put him on waivers. The Cubs claimed him. He's got 1 year left on his contract. I think he's worth due $10 million. I didn't see it coming. I think it's a great move, a sneaky great move by Jed Hoyer. He was a 6-WAR player last year. If you look at Baseball Reference, if you're into analytics and stuff, personally, for the longest time, I thought he was as average as any pitcher, but for some reason last year he was actually really good, and even in recent years he actually has been really good as well. So maybe I just didn't follow him enough, but for some reason I felt like I always saw him just giving up homers and highlights all the time. So after looking at his stats, and honestly, like I said, he had a really good year at the Reds last year. At 35, 1 year, 10 million, considering where the Cubs are at right now, I think it's a really good move. He's at least going to be a depth guy, and if things don't work out, they can flip him at the deadline. If he is playing well, at least if the Cubs are out of it by July, they could flip him at the deadline. It's kind of similar to if you go back to the very first rebuild when Theo Epstein was with the Cubs, when they flipped like Paul Maholm or,
I look at him as kind of like the Nova of the White Sox rebuild, Steve.
That's probably a decent comparison right there, although, they ultimately didn't flip Ivan Nova for anything. They just basically let him walk away and go to the Detroit Tigers. So, I think, I don't know, maybe, Cody, maybe a better comparison is Ryan Dempster.
Yeah, that's a better name. Yeah. In the first rebuild, the Cubs flipped like 3 or 4 guys at the deadline that were all pitchers, and I guess what's his name? Scott Feldman's another one. That's who they flipped and got Jake Arrieta. No one thought that trade was anything. It turned out to be the greatest trade in Cubs history, arguably.
Just imagine if Jesse Crane didn't fail the physical, and then Arrieta ends up going to the Sox. Think about the alternate universe that could have happened there.
Ooh,
yeah.
That's a really big rabbit hole that we can go down.
That's something people forget about, really. Yeah,
I forgot about that until you just brought that up.
I really did too.
I forgot about that.
I mean, we could really go into a whole butterfly effect thing right here.
Yeah. But I mean, either way, for a guy like Wade, of what Wade Miley has done lately, I mean, it's a solid move. Honestly, it's the kind of move where the kind of price tag on a pitcher that I was hoping the Cubs would go and get last season after they traded Yu Darvish. I'm someone who, when the Yu Darvish trade happened, I didn't hate the trade, and so far, it really hasn't looked bad in the Cubs in hindsight. But the problem with the Cubs that bothered me going into last season was that they traded Yu Darvish for prospects, and then they didn't spend on anyone that was at least half the price of Yu Darvish. Because at the time when they flipped him, there was still plenty of offseason left, and then they just didn't do anything. There's was his name Taiwan Walker, I think that's his, or Tajon Walker, I think it was his name.
Walker, yes.
Yeah, I always forget how you pronounce his name. But anyway, I don't remember how his season fully went, but I know for most of last season, he had a really good season with the Mets, and he was only making about anywhere between 10 to 12 million last year. I'm pretty sure
that kid had all the pedigree, man, as a prospect coming up. I remember tracking him for a little while through everything. And it was like, now you look at a guy like Taiwan Walker, and I feel like he's your consistent guy that is always available in the offseason, gets some sort of low salary. And there's tons of promise there, but like he's never really capitalized on anything.
Right. Well, like I said, the Mets end up giving him like a 3-year deal worth like, I think it was around 30 million. So he's making, like I said, like 30 or $10 million a season. And like I said, he was really solid for the Mets. That was what I was hoping the Cubs would do after they traded Yu Darvish. And then they, like I said, they didn't. And we saw what happened. Their starting pitching was awful because Zach Davies was not good. He couldn't even eat innings for the Cubs. So back to Wade Miley, he kind of fits that thought process, but the Cubs roster is completely different now. They still got a lot to do, but I think it's a good first step in the offseason. I know a lot of teams are like starting to agree with players. I know the Dodgers agree with a guy today. So I think that's a good sign that's like good, like for free agency, but obviously the CBA thing has to happen.
Yeah, let's call the elephant out in the room right here is that it's really interesting to see how organizations just across the MLB have been working. I expected there to be a lot more holdup right now, guys, than what we've seen in the first few days. Maybe these are agreements that, make sense for some of these guys right away to get off the table before anything gets locked down so that they have some certainty. But I thought that there was going to be some sort of, I don't know, just with the way that everybody said that this is going to go, I thought the players union and the players would be a little more unified and like, no, we are going to stall this out. I'm taking, I guess, somewhat of an optimistic approach that the fact that we've seen so much activity is a good sign right now, knowing where things are going to head in certain directions. I don't know about you guys.
Well, I think it also depends because you look at a guy like Andrew Heaney, who, signed that contract with the Dodgers here today, had a very tumultuous season with the Angels, and then after the trade to the Yankees, ultimately getting demoted out of the starting rotation. For a guy like him, there's a lot of uncertainty relating to what his market would be, what type of contract he was going to get. So I think for someone like him to try to jump the market, so to speak, get that guaranteed $8 million salary when, let's face it, nobody knows what the salary structure is going to look like after December 1st when this whole thing hits the fan. And so for a guy like him to lock that price in there, given kind of the Dodgers player development machine and their ability to go and serve as a reclamation point for a lot of guys right now with, their pitching lab and all the different things that they do, it's a really good spot for someone like him. And again, he's just trying to go about creating a level of cost certainty for himself and not having to wait potentially until February or March to figure out where exactly he's going to be next year.
Yeah, it's great points. Like you said, Tony, I was just as surprised to hear like players, coming to agreements and stuff. But it's great though. I'm glad that there's actual like rumors and like baseball like transactions being made, because I feel like in recent years, no one gets excited about the baseball offseason anymore. And I used to get really excited about it when I was younger. Winter meetings, you just see all these moves. I still remember when the Cubs signed John Lester when I was in college, and like it was like 2 a.m. I was in my room just like refreshing Twitter the entire night and stuff. And like it was like I said, it was a night to remember if I still remember it today. So
we all have those nights. I remember how many nights of sleep I lost because of the Manny Machado rumors.
Yeah.
I remember how many nights I lost a couple of years ago because of the Manny Machado rumors. That's how I met Buzz. Was up at 2 a.m. refreshing my phone, waiting for something. And there's like 5 people who are even still tweeting. It's NWI Steve, it's Buzz, it's me, and fake Jeff Passan. Like that's where, I can still remember all that stuff. I love the baseball off season, not as much as I love the baseball season, but you're correct, man. Like, I don't feel like a lot of people get excited about some of that stuff. And the fact that we've even gotten like a little taste of it right now just kind of makes me feel like there's going to be some really dark days ahead in January because like we're getting some of it, and I'm trying to stay positive, but I feel like just because we're getting some of that right now means that like January, we're going to be sitting there like there is nothing. And that's those days where you pull up your phone and you head to MLB trade rumors, and it's like they haven't posted anything in 2 days, and that things are just not good.
Right. I guess the only other it's not. Honestly, this could be for both teams, so I guess it's a good way to transition to Sox. But Nick Castellanos declined his option with the Reds, and I think that's like notable for both teams. Nick Castellanos should have never been with the Reds. He should have been with the Cubs, but Tom Ricketts didn't want to pay him. That is what I will always believe, and that it honestly breaks my heart because the Cubs got him for nothing and then didn't keep him, and it I know it weighs on Ron Luce as much as it does me. Like he should have been a Cub for a long time after 2019. But he is a free agent. So now I know the White Sox are contenders. They will be contenders for years to come. So, and the Cubs are just in this transition. So I don't know if what he wants to do. But I do know the Cubs have plenty of money. White Sox do too, but we all know how that works. So
put that on a tee for you, Steven.
So, I, as an optimistic Cubs fan, and if Tom Ricketts and Jed Hoyer are saying what they said after the deadline and everything they've said in interviews with Chicago sports radio, like, I'm not saying that you give him whatever he wants, but I would like the Cubs to at least be in the conversation to get him, at least be in the conversation. And if someone outbids him and pays him, I don't know what his value, like he was severely underpaid last 2 years, honestly. So he's going to be 29. I don't know what his market is right now, but I'm assuming this guy's at least getting $25 million a season. So I don't know how much farther I'd go up, but
25 million a season, Steven. We just talked about premier free agents.
Yeah. Once you get to that point, that automatically eliminates the White Sox from the discussion because as it's been very well documented, Jerry Reinsdorf's goal in life is to try to fill his coffin with as many dollar bills as he possibly can before it gets lowered into the ground. So Nick Castellanos, that ain't going to happen. I personally like to refer to him right now as Nick Castellanos, future San Francisco Giant.
I mean, again, I think any team should be in play for him. He's one of the top hitters on the market, man. He was just rotting in Cincinnati, putting up elite numbers and not getting anything really in return from the rest of their team. It's honestly sad. And that's why it makes me so mad that he wasn't on the Cubs. I feel like he would have significantly made a difference on the Cubs if he was there. But,
everything just rots in Cincinnati, though. They call it the nasty natty for a reason.
Didn't they try and go for it for like a little bit for a while?
For that 2020 season when they traded for dickbag Trevor Bauer and when they brought in Castellanos, they had obviously that was the winner they signed Wade Miley to, I believe, after he had been with Milwaukee. So they had tried to do a couple of things and they made it. They had that series against the Braves before they lost.
They didn't even. I don't think they won a game.
No, they didn't.
They got swept. Yeah. You looked at their roster the last 2 years, and you're kind of like, wow, that's a solid team, especially with all the young guys they had coming up. But for some reason, they just really couldn't put it together. And honestly, that just sums up the Reds since my entire life. So outside of like a couple of years, they went to the playoffs. So, it is what it is. He's definitely, like I said, I think he's going to get paid a shit ton of money. And at 29 years old, I mean, it just depends on, to me, it just depends on the length of the contract. Because even at 29, it's kind of like, all right, we're not going to give this guy like I wouldn't give this guy an 8-year deal. I would give him like a solid 6 or 7, or if we do go 8 years, maybe throw in a club option in there or 2.
I feel like it's
you're
probably
talking 8-year deals to a guy that's never experienced a franchise go out.
Listen,
and
it's
give
not
someone
always
an
great
8-year
to have
deal
guys like that, though.
at 25 mil. Like, this is foreign concept to me. This is foreign concept to me.
You also haven't had to have Jason Hayward's contract on your in the back of your head for the last 6,
but
7 years.
We've got a problem with Dallas Keuchel's contract right now, Cody. Like, people think that it's just going to be so fucking easy to go out there and move Dallas Keuchel this offseason and then go sign another pitcher for 20 mil plus a year and then go bring in a right fielder. Like, that's not going to happen.
There is but one way.
Yeah, there is.
You get rid of Dallas Keuchel, and that is if in the CBA, if there is a salary floor, because then teams like Baltimore, Arizona, and Pittsburgh, they're going to have to take on big contracts to get to that floor. And that is the only way Jerry Reinsdorf can be saved from himself.
But that's why it might happen, is because the owners want a way to get out of bad contracts, and the only way that you get out of bad contracts is you make them valuable. That's what's in the NHL right now. When there's a value in taking on dead money, it doesn't matter if he goes to the Baltimore Orioles and you DFA him, because he can sit there and he can eat up those books to help you achieve what you need to do. And that's just sunk cost at that point in time for someone who's in the middle of a rebuild. For the White Sox, who are a competing team right now, that contract looks bad. The Jason Hayward contract looks fucking terrible on the Cubs for the entire life of it, almost, as soon as he started to decline. And that's how many contracts go in baseball. You look at, like, Albert Pujols was like a subject because of that contract and how he played out through that towards the end. I think it happens in this CBA. I think it does. I think it has a chance to do it because owners are going to want a way to move that type of money off of their books and allow their GMs to go out and put a competitive team on the field.
I don't think it's just that, though. I think it's the Players Association is looking at this as, a way to try to combat tanking, and they think that putting the salary floor in place is going to do that, but basically the owners and the Ivy League GMs are going to use this as a way to circumvent that. And, especially looking for a team like Baltimore, say they were to go and take on the Dallas Keuchel money, it serves two purposes for them. One, it helps them get to, a proposed salary floor, but also at the same time, Mike Elias, since he took over that team, he's following the Houston Astros model. He wants to just burn that thing to the ground. And Dallas Keuchel making, 25, 26 starts against teams in the AL East would really help them meet an objective of having another 110 loss season and getting another number 1 pick.
But he's ready to go right now, Steve.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah. So I don't know.
We're heated over here, Cody. I apologize.
No, you're good. I actually love the back and forth because it's very relatable just with me and other people as well. But as far as Nick Castellanos, like I said, I think he fits on both sides of the city, in my opinion. Another guy that I feel like fits on both sides of the city is one of my favorite players ever, Kyle Schwarber. He is officially a free agent.
I became a very big Kyle Schwarber fan in that Boston playoff series when he was hitting home runs because, as Steve said, ball go far, team go far.
Right.
I also am now, well, I was. I'm not going to say now because it was very in the moment, a big Jorge Soler guy. And just, I think I texted you about that one, Steve.
You did text me about George Soler, yes.
Yes, I wanted him on the south side for like a very brief moment in time.
Yeah, well, Kyle Schwarber, his situation's interesting. He declined because obviously he's going to make more than, I think it's like 10 million or whatever, or he deserves to make more than like 10 million. So personally, I feel like if the National League gets the DH implemented, I think the Cubs should at least entertain getting Schwarber, especially if they can't get Castellanos. And I prefer not to have them both because they're both defensive liabilities. As much as I feel like Schwarber has improved as a defensive outfielder, he's still, average at best. Like, I'm just being real with that. And Castellanos also has, issues playing right field as well. So from a Cubs perspective, if the DH is implemented and you can't get Castellanos, I feel like Schwarber would be a nice consolation to that. If you want to call it a consolation, I think they're both great hitters. But I wouldn't be surprised if he went back to Boston too, just based off the second half he had. He had a great season overall, but he had an even better second half. And, his postseason, fans loved him. He's an easy guy to like. Personally, I don't think the White Sox deserve him after the Red Sox came to the South Side and everyone booed him when he was a Red Sox. And I didn't really understand that other than the fact that he was on the Cubs. And I just think that's a little petty, like a little way too petty, in my personal opinion, guys. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna have to stop you right there because I'm old enough to remember hearing stories of in 1984 after the Baltimore Orioles traded Tito Landrum to the St. Louis Cardinals, the Cubs' biggest rival. Tito Landrum, the same guy who hit the decisive home run in Game 5 of the '83 ALCS, and Cub fans gave him a standing ovation. A guy on the Cardinals. We're gonna talk about pettiness here.
I wasn't alive. I guess that does. I guess that's my excuse. I'm just saying for me and for this situation, I wasn't. I thought it was a little ridiculous. But again, if he did go to the Sox, it wouldn't be a surprise to me. Like, I think he would be you could probably get him at a better price than Castellanos.
I would think so, and he obviously would add an element hitting from the left side of the plate, which is something that the Sox desperately need to balance out their lineup a little bit more. So there is a case to be made for Kyle Schwarber. I'm not necessarily sure that they're looking to add another guy that is a corner defensive liability to the roster. They have a glut of those guys right now, but you never know, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, too, because obviously you already have Eloy and you have his defensive issues as well. I just,
Jesus Christ.
Well, I'm not even trying to slander. I'm just saying this is something
you want to talk about putting it on a tee for Anthony there.
Yeah,
oh boy.
You're just teeing him up for both of us. Like, the whole Eloy thing just drives me absolutely nuts. And you're correct. Like, you talk about Nick Castellanos and having problems with the defense, and Kyle Schwarber and problems with the defense. Steve, you're correct. How many guys do you need of that build before, like, your whole, like, now you might as well let Eloy play second base at this point in time and see what happens.
I mean, they basically have got a couple, 2-3 of the same guy out there already. Right-hand hitting corner guys, defensive liabilities. So, yeah, I'm not sure they need more.
He did play first base for the Red Sox in the postseason, and I know you got Jose Abreu.
Yeah, but
I don't know
the second coming of Babe Ruth.
Well, perhaps I don't know, man. They also said that about Kyle Schwarber too, man. So
you gotta understand something here, Cody. Gavin Sheets might be, and no offense, Adrian, that might be Tony's favorite son.
Yeah. No, not my favorite son.
I also thought Andrew Vaughn was supposed to be the future first baseman too. So
Andrew Vaughn, some people said it was Jake Berger. Some people said it was Eloy Jimenez. Some people, like, a future first baseman of the Chicago White Sox. As far as I'm concerned, Jose Abreu is signed until, he croaks, right, Steve? Because he's probably got the lifetime contract. And if you look at the White Sox right now, the biggest question is going to be, what do you do with Jose Abreu when this contract expires, when you have a whole entire system that's built on first base DH types, and a couple of the other guys can play third base, and Yohan Moncada's locked down. So where do you go from there? That's going to be the problem with the White Sox.
Basically, where you go is some of these guys ultimately are not going to be within the organization for much longer. There just simply aren't enough spots for these guys. And we saw in 2021 defensively, this team was, not great, Bob. So there's definitely going to need to be some reshuffling of the chairs, so to speak. And I've been kind of talking about this for a little while here between Eloy and Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets and Jake Berger. one or two of these guys I fully expect to be in another organization when spring training kicks off at whatever point that is in 2022.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see where these two big bats go, guys. I'm not fully sure. I'm not going to reel myself in believing the Cubs are going to go spend all this money on whoever, but they do have money to spend, and they should spend some of it. So we'll see. You guys got any big news to share with me?
Lance Lynn up for the AL Cy Young. Lance Lynn. I played ZZ Top for like 2 hours after I got that news. And that's why we were late to get on at 7:30. It's because I needed to listen to more ZZ Top, because that's what you have to do when Lance Lynn takes the mound, is listen to ZZ Top, as our boy Johnny would say, Steve. Lance Lynn, I don't know if you know this, Cody, but we gave up a really good prospect to get Lance Lynn on the south side. And some would say
Dane Dunning, right?
Dane Dunning, like
yes,
top tier.
Yes.
Steve has been leading an investigation for the past year into why the White Sox would give up Dane Dunning to get Lance Lynn. From an outside perspective, Cody, why would you trade Dane Dunning to get 1 year of Lance Lynn, who signed a 2-year extension?
I'm assuming that Steve wasn't a fan of this trade at the time. Maybe he's flipped sides now. I'm not sure.
No. See, what it ultimately came down to is there were some dopes in the realm of White Sox Twitter who basically said that the trade was bad because Lynn only had 1 year of contractual control left, and most people, for whatever reason, couldn't grasp the concept that he was pretty much tipping his hand that he wanted to sign an extension, and that this was a player that was right in the Sox wheelhouse to sign an extension because it wouldn't be cost prohibitive for a penny pinching mom and pop shop organization like the White Sox. And so, but for whatever reason, people couldn't grasp that concept. And they also couldn't seem to grasp the concept that this team said from the outset of spring training that their goal was to try to win the World Series. And if you take a look at Dane Dunning's game log, I believe it was after like August 15th, I think he threw more than 2 innings in appearance once, which I'm not necessarily a baseball savant, not the website either. But if you're trying to win the World Series and you need guys in your rotation, I think you typically need them to give you more than 6 outs, which Dane Dunning struggled to do for the last 6 weeks of the season. I don't know. I even went down to Texas, saw the Sox play the Rangers down there. I saw Rick Hahn on the concourse. I had a couple 2-3 words with him. We talked through it a little bit. I'm still leading the investigation. I've hit a little bit of a wall right now. I'm seeking outside counsel and outside help to try to finally get an answer to all of this.
Oh. Well, I hope you get your answer, man. From an outside perspective, from me, I think that at the time of the trade, I didn't really have an opinion. I thought I was like, okay, Lance Lynn, veteran, the White Sox are trying to make themselves put themselves in contention. Dane Dunning, they still had a lot of development going, because I felt like in 2020, a lot of teams called up a lot of guys because they needed guys because of COVID and all these protocols and all this other bullshit. So a lot of guys really just got opportunities that no one really expected. I thought Dane Dunning might have been one of those guys, but he showed flashes of being solid, and he also, like you said, had times where he struggled to get out. So Lance Lynn, been in the league a long time, has found a way to make a solid career. I won't lie. I did think he was done a few years ago, but then he really figured it out in Texas. And he carried it over to the White Sox. So, I mean, I thought the extension made sense, especially because they only got him for that 1 year. So I guess it kind of justifies the trade a little bit more. I will say that if I'm a Sox fan, I'm just hoping Lucas Giolito gets back to 2019, 2020 form. He was solid last season, but I don't think he was as good as 2019, 2020.
I'll give you some news. I think that Lucas Giolito going to the World Series, getting absolutely blasted, hammered is a good thing while he watched his high school friend pitch.
Max Fried. Yes.
Yes. I will say this.
Cody,
Like,
did you know they went to the same high school together with Jack Flaherty? Were you aware?
I was aware, man. I've been told this at least a few billion times.
But I'll say this: if you guys ever like gone to an event or something, and you see somebody that you know doing something cool, and then it's like you kind of internalize that as a person, right? Like you're like, we were there together. That person's succeeding. I can go do this too. I think that's a good thing for Lucas Giolito right there. Like I'm happy
Perhaps.
with that one.
Yeah,
Maybe.
that's a tinfoil. Is that a tinfoil hat type?
Not quite
thing?
tinfoil hat, more inspirational, but I think, we can go in. If you want to go tinfoil hat, like you've got the right two people here to do it. Yes, optimistic thinking.
Yeah.
Worst pitcher in baseball. Then he gets the guaranteed rate commercial. Then he goes and gets absolutely hammered watching his high school friend pitch in the World Series. Then he wants to go achieve the World Series. I mean, I'm building a storyline for like a really unhappy ending, but that's where we're going here. Like, I want next year's guaranteed rate commercial to be like Lucas Giolito sat there and watched his high school friend pitch in the World Series. And then the year after he was there.
Right.
And the rest is up to him because he's the one pitching, right? But it's Tony La Russa's fault whether or not he wins. So we'll go with that.
For sure.
I may have chose violence there, Steve.
You did. I think you chose violence.
That was mild violence right there. Very mild.
I'll just, like I was saying, I think if Lucas Giolito gets back to like that Cy Young form, I think that Lance Lynn's value gets even better for the last 2 years with the White Sox. I just don't think if he's your best pitcher again next season, I don't think that bodes well for your postseason hopes. Like, that's all I'm saying. I do think he's a solid number 2, number 3 starter. I just I don't want him being my number 1 guy going into game 1 of the ALDS next season. If I'm a Sox fan, that's just me. So, but again,
Steve, I'll let you comment on that one.
I don't think that that's an unfair assessment, to be completely honest, because I think, at this juncture of their careers, Lucas Giolito does still have some upside growth to his development there. Whereas, Lance Lynn is what he is at this point. He's a good, solid, quality major league starting pitcher. He's a guy. He's a number 2, or number 3 on a really stacked rotation. But those guys have a lot of value, especially to get through 162 game season. You need guys like that are going to take the ball consistently. And I know he had a couple of instances this year where he did miss some starts with some, lat issues and things. But, by and large, he was something that they could count on. And that's important over the course of a regular season. But you get into those short game situations that if you have, that Lucas Giolito that they had in game 1 against Oakland in 2020, that's a different level right there.
Right. And that's pretty much what I was getting at is you love what he brings to your ball club in terms of value, and you're probably going to get 30 starts out of him. Like you just lock it in, and you're probably getting 5, 6, sometimes 7 innings out of him. Like you can just lock that in. And I think that is the value for him, is that he can go out there and give you that. All I'm saying is, if Lucas Giolito isn't like I said, the Cy Young form that we saw in previous seasons, I just don't think that bodes well for the Sox next season, because he's like with where he's at in his career in the youth and everything. I just feel like his stuff's so much nastier than Lynn's, and he can go out there and win you a game if he's right. So, that's just my 2 cents on that. But I mean, hey,
I don't think you're wrong there. I don't think you're wrong there. I think that, from a pure Arsenal standpoint, Lucas Giolito, I would take his Arsenal over Lance Lynn's every day, because what you're getting out of Lance Lynn. And I think that from a standpoint of when you look at both of these pitchers, you've got literally, guts and glory. Just go out there, throw you the fastball. If you hit it, you hit it. I'm fucked.
Tony, it's not guts and glory. It's guts and nuts.
Guts and nuts. Yeah, whatever it is. Whatever it is, what you're getting out of Lance Lynn. It's the attitude. It's the persona. It's Lance Lynn. With Lucas Giolito, it's a little more dialed back but scientific approach towards pitching. I'm going to be pinpoint. I'm going to I'm going to make you swing and miss at something that is going to have movement, is going to offset your speed. With Lance Lynn, I'm just going to challenge you, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like there's totally different, with Lucas Giolito, it's a piece of art. With Lance Lynn, it's very raw. And I think that those are two totally different styles of pitching, but I get where you're coming from with Lucas Giolito there. When he's on, I think that style of pitching is just so much more dangerous because it's not just the fastball that beats you. It's the mixing of speeds. It's the pinpoint control. It's the dropping of a 12-6 curveball that just throws you off. It's totally different games. But I think that both of these guys provide a different set of values to everybody else that's on the staff, and Dylan Cease and Michael Kopech and some of the other guys, because you get that energy from Lance Lynn. You talk about what type of energy he brings. You even hear Dylan Cease talking about how Lance Lynn impacted his ability to get emotional on the mound. And Dylan Cease, I would say he profiles more like a Lucas Giolito. You add the two of those up, that's where you've got your type of Cy Young pitcher that can develop. And that's kind of how I'm thinking, like Dylan Cease, that's kind of where my apples are right now as I kind of put the two together. If you can combine both of them, you can get somebody who gets a little emotional. And I know Dylan Cease gets more emotional about throwing Frisbees into like froth. I don't even know what the technical term is, Frisbee golf holes that he does when he's on the mound. But you capture that, you throw it out there, and that's what you need. You need a guy like that.
Yeah. You mentioned Michael Kopech. I feel like I get, maybe this is what everyone in Sox Twitter is saying. I don't know, but like I feel like if he's a starter next year, he's kind of like your X factor on like winning 90 games or 100. In my, like, if you get 30 starts out of him and he's solid, I mean, I don't know if they're gonna have like an innings count on him considering the injury history. But
I'll toss this one to you, Steve.
If you get really good innings out of him, though, like that changes a lot of things for that rotation. If he shows up and is like, what everything everyone said when he was coming up as a prospect.
It does, Cody. The issue with this, and this is something that I wrote about, and for whatever the reason, I had a bunch of mouth-breathing idiots replying to me that I didn't know what I was talking about back in September when I said that the plan for him and the utilization of him didn't make any sense because they weren't stretching him out. And it basically made it such that how was there going to be a meaningful transition into the starting rotation? Because now basically what we saw from Carlos Rodon this year, the last 6 weeks of the season where he was essentially out of gas, going from 34 innings in 2019, 7 innings in 2020 to then 130 some this year, and he was just simply out of gas. We're going to see the same thing from Michael Kopech next year because I can't envision a scenario where he's going to be able to give them more than 130 innings based off of the fact that he had 2.5 years of not throwing a competitive pitch. So, and we even saw at points during 2021 where he was going through dead arm periods. So the idea that he's just automatically going to transition into the starting rotation, go 160 to 170 innings, it's just something that's not realistic. So you're going to have someone else in the rotation to be able to make up for that volume that is going to be needed right there. Now, I think he's obviously going to be able to give them some quality, but again, that volume piece of it is something that can't be discounted when you talk about having to cover 162 games.
Yeah. Yeah, you make a lot of sense. And, I hadn't really followed how they'd been using him that much last season, outside of the fact that I knew that he was coming out of the bullpen, but I just didn't – I knew he made a few starts as well. So it's just kind of like I don't know what their idea there is.
The last major start that he made was 5 innings, and I think that was – a career high for him. I can't remember back when he pitched, a couple of years ago. If he made it more than 5, it was almost like a curse. Every time he pitched, it rained, and there was a shortened game, and there was all sorts of issues, and he would have to come out during rain delays, and there was all sorts of stuff. But he threw a really impressive 5 innings against the Texas Rangers back in like late April, wasn't it, Steve?
Yeah, I was there.
He struck out 10 batters. Mm-hmm. It was absolutely phenomenal. And you look at that, and when you get it stretched out a little bit, I think he is kind of that X-factor pitcher. I think he's got number one stuff. The questions, though, are still, can you do that for close to 200 innings a season? And what are they going to do to try and protect that arm? What's his agent going to do to try and protect that arm? Because when he's up for a contract, they're going to want maximum dollar value on a name like Michael Kopech because he brings that rock star shit. And if there's one guy that I'm kind of worried about because of we're talking about a guy that's he's high profile.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the Sox are going to have a hard time locking him down in particular more than they will Lucas Giolito. And I would rather have Michael Kopech here longer than I would rather have Lucas Giolito.
I disagree with that 100%, Tony.
I'm a little surprised you said that, to be honest with you. Maybe it's a little bit of youth, but I don't know.
Yeah, if there's one guy that I don't think the Sox are going to lock up, I think it's Lucas Giolito because of the fact that this is a guy that...
No, that's what I'm saying. I would rather have Michael Kopech here than Lucas Giolito.
Okay, I misheard. Okay.
I didn't mishear. I am surprised that you would rather have Kopech than Giolito. Personally.
See, I'm not looking at it from the standpoint of who I would rather have. I'm looking at it more so from the standpoint of who is more realistic to be here long term.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
So you both disagree with me just for different things. I'd like to hear both sides of this, and then let's quickly talk about what we said.
Talked about the injuries and everything with Kopech, and I feel like Giolito's, the last 3 years, I know I said that this year he was kind of down compared to the two before, and I know 2020 was a 60-game season, so he probably pitched 50 innings or something. But I feel like you're at a point where you basically know what you're going to get out of him, and you still have these questions about Kopech when it comes to health and the role. You don't know, unless you just decide a role, and maybe Kopech is, you already got, technically got two closers on your team right now, but maybe he is a back end guy, long term. I don't know, because of the injury history. I don't know, but if you're not gonna give him the chance to be a starter, which obviously they are, but if you're giving him an innings limit and I don't know what that innings limit is.
So you want him to be unleashed is basically what you're saying here. If you're not going to unleash him.
I would say that he needs he needs to be unleashed a little bit. Maybe more than what some people might want, I guess. I mean, I understand having an innings limit considering his history and everything, but I don't know. You guys remember when Steven Strasburg had that innings limit back after he had that surgery, and then they just didn't pitch for the last 2 months of the season or whatever it was? That's what I don't want to see if I'm a Sox fan. And I don't think that'll happen since he already pitched this year.
I'm right there with you. You saw that with Carlos Rodon this year, but they didn't say strictly this was innings limit. There was a whole fallout that came from that led up to everything that we just saw in the last week, Steve. That's my opinion on it, because you saw a velocity dip, and all of a sudden it was alarm bells are going off for certain individuals within the organization. You see the velocity drop. You hear about the tiredness. You hear all that stuff. Imagine the Whites. I feel like the same thing is going to play out again next year because history repeats itself. And that's what you're going to have with Michael Kopech in September. And the problem is, at least for me with the White Sox, Tony La Russa rested all the starters, all the guys in the lineup so much to kind of protect them and isolate them to be ready for September. If I've got one gripe, it's the fact that we made it into September, October, and the rotation was the problem when it was so strong through April, May, June. And the guys that people grew to love and count on shat the bed in October because they weren't isolated the same way, even though they had the injury history that was there. I'd rather you sit there and say, Michael Kopech isn't throwing an inning until May, and we're going to sign some Joe Schmo off the bench, and Michael Kopech will come in May, June, July, and start to ramp up and go, instead of throwing him through April and May hardcore innings-wise, and then just let him go. But the problem is, Steve, you talk about stretching a guy out. How do you get a guy ready for that? Because let's be honest, no one's built to go this full baseball season anymore the way they were 100 years ago. It just doesn't work that way.
Well, I think one of the things that can happen, and this is one of the things that I wrote about a few weeks ago, was that had they managed Kopech and Rodon, I think in tandem, given some of the off days that were available, you had opportunities to skip guys and give guys a little bit of a breather, skip a turn in the rotation. And I think had they done that, with Carlos Rodon in the first half, maybe some of these issues that happened the last 6 weeks of the season wouldn't have taken place. At the same time, that would have given you an opportunity to have Michael Kopech throw some spot starts, helping to stretch him out a little bit. So that could have helped twofold right there for not only the 2021 White Sox, but this team going into 2022 here. So I think that's one area that they're going to have to look at is, okay, are there going to be opportunities? Are there going to be breaks in the schedule where we can give Michael Kopech a blow, skip him, one turn through the rotation here to kind of allow him to get through that full 6 months and prevent some of that wear and tear through the first half of the season that we ultimately saw with Carlos Rodon, that in the second half played a significant factor in his lack of availability and some of his performance issues.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that point of like doing the tandem thing. I think that probably would have paid off a little bit more. Maybe Rodon would have been able to make it through the end of the year. So I don't know. You get, I will say this. It's like a good problem to have, I guess, right now with what you got with those with like Kopech and
But
Giolito.
the
And
stakes are higher,
decision.
Cody. The stakes are higher. I thought the same
It's
thing.
true.
Like it's a good problem to have, but it's also a problem that bites you in the ass when you get down to like the brass tacks of it. It's like, okay, you got 5 games to make it through that ALDS, and we didn't get through it this year. So what's going to change next year in order to make that happen? I'm not even like, from a baseball standpoint, I'm going to sit back and just enjoy 162 next year. I'm getting up for the playoffs because now we've been there 2 years in a row. How do you get past that first round?
Right.
And unless we're in like July, where the Tigers, I think, might jump out and challenge the White Sox, some of this stuff is going to get mundane. It's going to be more, and not even for me as a fan. Imagine being the player. Imagine being Lucas Giolito going to the playoffs for 2 years. How do you get up for that start in mid-June? So that stuff's going to start to develop, and you see teams. You have to take that next step forward. You have to, right. And now you've kind of
still say that they
spot 2 years in a row
because of the past 2 years. Though I would still think that the players are going to get up for a start in June, because that everyone will be talking about exactly what you just said. They missed, couldn't get past the first round the last 2 years. They still should all have a chip on their shoulder. It's not like the Cubs when they won in 16 and then, completely came out flat for half of 2017 and, managed to get hot and still make the playoffs, or, even in 18 when, they were honestly, I mean, you win 95 games, you should make the playoffs and or at least win your division. But, our MLB freaking playoff.
We've seen that too,
stupid, Steven. But, I digress. I'm just saying that after 16, if there was a lot of talk behind, that exact thing that you're saying, Tony, about like players, taking days off and not caring about a random game in June and stuff like that. And it really came back to haunt the Cubs in certain parts of the last, 5 years. So I see what you're saying, but because they haven't won it all yet, though, I think that there's still a lot of hunger there, and there's still a lot of I do think that those players will still, treat every game like it's, their last, I guess, in a way. So.
Steve, you got any thoughts? I want to get into this Chris Bryant, Yohan Moncada talk, because I've got to go talk some Blackhawks after this. So I want to get to that. But Steve, do you have any thoughts on that one before we jump into that topic?
I just think that, to both of your points there, I can see both sides of the coin. Ultimately, I feel like you could make an argument that this team could approach it with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, because for so much of the season, there was all this talk about, they don't play well against teams above 500. And, they've might feel like they have to go out and prove something from that aspect, especially the way that they lost to Houston. Never mind the fact that the team that won the World Series had a sub 500 record against winning teams, but that narrative just didn't get talked about very much for whatever the reason. So they could certainly use that a little bit as fuel to kind of push through the regular season there. And I think there is something to that. And, Cody, I mean, you can certainly speak to this. The second half of 2015, when the Cubs really turned it on, I think particularly in August, when they finally were able to start punching the Cardinals in the mouth a little bit there, and the Pirates to an extent, that kind of showed that, hey, we're ready to go here. And I think that might be something that the Sox have to kind of show their ability to do at some point during the 2022 season here, when they're going up against teams like the Yankees or, teams like, the Astros, and just kind of show, hey, we can beat these guys. They won plenty of series against quality teams at home in particular. So I think going out there and trying to find ways to win series on the road against those good teams is also going to be something that is going to be paramount for them here going forward.
Yeah, I mean, Cubs in 2015 second half, I mean that team was on the brink of, falling below 500. Chris Bryant hits a walk-off homer against the Rockies, and then they just take off and win, like, I don't even know. At that time they were on pace for maybe 85 wins. They finished with 97, 98. I can't remember. So, like, that team just got extremely hot. But I feel like, I felt like the Sox in the beginning of last season had a stretch like that. Maybe not as many games, obviously, but like in April and May, they really were. They were just destroying everyone they were playing. So, I know the narrative about playing against teams above 500, but you can't ask a team to get hot like that at the end of the season. Like you take them whenever you can get them. I think the pro for what the Sox had at that, with the biggest pro they had, was they were able to coast to the end and be healthy for the postseason. And just, obviously the offense just kind of died in October. So,
except for Gavin Sheets.
Sure. Yeah. So, I don't know. I do like the comparison. I don't know. I do think that baseball is just weird, and you just got to get hot at the right time, man. The Braves won 88
I can agree
games
with
and they
that.
won the World Series. Like, I don't get it. But that's why I'm also like, you see the team like the Braves win the World Series, and then that's why I've had to defend the Cubs team from 16, where that I've heard people tell me that they were lucky and like they didn't deserve to be there. And it's like, they were the best team all season, 103 wins, and to get all the way to the World Series. Yes, they got a little lucky in the World Series with the, Michael Brantley not playing with the Indians.
Carlos Carrasco not pitching.
Yes.
That was, I think,
Trevor
that was
Bauer's finger because of his fucking drone. I get it. But it's not like no team has ever had some sort of luck path on their way to the World Series. There's been very few teams. So, I just think that with what you said, Steve, it's just kind of like, you just got to find a way to put it all together at the right time, I think. So it's easier said than done, obviously.
Putting it all together is really, how do you put it together in that last 2 weeks of the season through October? And that's you saw that with the Braves right there. You saw that with the 05 White Sox. And I know that's like cliche to say, but when you go back and you look at teams,
Tone, I'm calling a timeout right there. I hate that narrative so much about the Sox, just getting hot, the last 2 weeks of that season. They were the first team since the 1990 Cincinnati Reds to go wire to wire. They didn't spend a single day in second place.
I know that, Steve. And that's why I say I know it's cliche to say that, because they did go wire to wire, and they were a good baseball team the entire season and continued it throughout the postseason. I'm just using that as an example, because when you think about when they got really, really good and dialed it up to another level, there were some issues that took place during that September in late August with the Cleveland Indians, where there were some question marks. And yes, they went wire to wire, but they turned it back on right there. And that's why I think it kind of sounds cliche, but that's another just example from me in watching baseball where it's like you're asking somebody to turn it back on. Could the Sox have won the World Series still if they didn't like get really, really hot there at the end? I don't know the answer to that question. Could they have finished the season still in first place? I think so. That's kind of where I'm at with it. You look at some of these teams that go on to the St. Louis Cardinals, Cody. You've probably experienced this multiple times as a Cubs fan and been like, what the hell's going on right here? And even things that you said about, Tony La Russa's never out of a playoff series. You look at the St. Louis Cardinals, there were some seasons where they weren't really the best team, and all of a sudden they just show up out of nowhere and come win you a
2006.
Exactly.
Yep. 2011. Like, don't get me started, guys. Don't get me started. Yeah. No, you make a good point, man. So,
that's kind of where I'm at with like the turn it back on thing. Let's go to Chris Bryant and Yohan Moncada and let's get out of here.
Okay. Where do we want to start?
I'll turn it to Steve because he's got the question for you, Cody. I'm just here to moderate.
All right. So Cody, I wrote a piece about a week or so ago because there's just been a lot of back and forth within the realm of White Sox Twitter, which I don't know if you've ever gone down that rabbit hole. It's really a very special place. And there's these two really polarizing sides of it. You've got one side that looks at the WAR number and sees that 4.5 number from 2021, and then you've got the other side of it that only sees the 14 home runs and the 60 RBIs, what have you, looking at things from a 1950 lens of watching baseball. And so depending on which perspective you take, he's either awesome or he's a bum. And it kind of just like takes me back to, I want to say it was what, 2018 when Bryant hurt his shoulder sliding into third base in Colorado, and then he seemingly for the rest of that year and for a good portion of 2019 he really didn't have his power stroke. And as an outside observer, it really seemed like the Cubs fan base turned on him and basically were kind of like, oh, if we're going to re-sign one player, we should re-sign Javi Baez and just let Chris Bryant go. He's not worth it. He's not really that good. And I just find the parallels really fascinating because, Yohan Moncada, while he put everything together in 2019, had that just phenomenal season where he was, you can make a case he was a top 10 player in the entire sport, offensively and defensively. And he hasn't put it all together since then in all phases of the game. And just to see the way that the Sox fan base seemingly has turned on him in certain aspects, it kind of reminds me of what, just as an outside observer, I kind of saw and heard on sports talk radio, people turning on Chris Bryant, a guy who was an MVP on a team that won the World Series.
Right. Yeah, I've kind of read some tweets about Yohan Moncada throughout the year, and as an outside guy, I was like, I don't get it. He's a great player. Now, Chris Bryant, I've been the Chris Bryant's biggest fan on Cubs Twitter. At least that's what I'm always going to believe. Chris Bryant, even in 2017, people started like questioning if Chris Bryant had already peaked or whatever. And Chris Bryant was a 7-WAR player in 2017. I'm pretty sure he was, if not the top third baseman in the National League in terms of WAR, he was the second. It was either him or Nolan Arenado or Anthony Rendon. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they were all three of them were right there. And even in 2017, a Cubs team that went to the NLCS, but because the Cubs struggled half the season and because they just didn't look like the 2016 Cubs, a lot of Cubs fans just, I don't know. That's what blows my mind the most about Chris Bryant, like naysayers or haters or people who gave up on him, whatever. And that's a real thing. I don't know how to really prove it other than just typing in, going into advanced search Chris Bryant and just put Chris Bryant, and then 2017, you'll find tweets of people, being pissed off at this guy. But in 2018, yeah, that's when really Chicago media started to go in on him, because injuries. I mean, the shoulder injury happened, but he had a slew of nagging ones that came beforehand. You know, it's I really didn't understand it because it was like the first time he ever really been hurt in his career. So he missed a chunk of the season. The Cubs still managed to win 95 games. And he even when he tried to come back from the shoulder injury, he completely changed his swing just so he could try and come back and play. I mean, when you look at it in hindsight, you kind of wish that the Cubs would have just shut him down and let him come back next season. But he either talked him into it or something. I don't know. It's never been revealed. But that's what happened. He came back. He wasn't very good offensively or really even defensively, because at that time he was basically playing third base all the time, not outfield like he does these days. And then 2019, yeah, he was. I mean, he went to the All-Star game in 2019. That doesn't really mean much in today's game. I know a lot of guys go to the All-Star game and aren't really that great anymore. Or at least they'll have a really good first half, but their second half will suck. And I feel like that's kind of what happened with Chris Bryant in 2019. I thought his first half was decent, and then second half
the annual MLB popularity contest.
Yeah, well, perhaps, yeah. He's obviously a very popular player. So, but in 2019, in the second half, I think the Cubs had a series in San Francisco. He was doing batting practice in the cage, and I guess he like tweaked his knee in the cage or something, and the Cubs played it off like it was no big deal. But ever since that was reported, the rest of the season, he really just wasn't very good. So that's another thing that led to all of the slander, I guess. And then obviously in 2020, he just wasn't very good at all. He also only played like half of the 60 games. So, you got 2.5 seasons there where he's just up and down. There's no real consistency, whatever. So I just, when I say all of what I just said, I don't see that really with Yoan Moncada. I don't know how many games he's missed due to injury. I know in 2020 he got COVID, and a lot of people gave him a pass because of the COVID thing. I don't know how many games he played this year, but I thought he played most of the season. You got a 4.5 WAR player playing third base, or at least, somewhere on the infield. I don't understand why anyone would complain about that. I don't know what his WAR was in 2019. I don't know how much of a difference. I mean, maybe it's because he's not hitting as many home runs. Maybe it's the casual fan. I don't know. Like that's what I've always thought about the people who were like done with Chris Bryant, as I just think they're all a bunch of casual fans who are expecting 40 home runs, 100 RBIs, batting 300. And like, no one really does that anymore except for fucking Mike Trout and Carlos Correa or fucking Mookie Betts, even though Mookie Betts didn't even do that this year. But you understand the sense of what I'm saying, like the top players in the game.
Yeah. And I think part of it, and this is something that Tony and I have talked about quite a bit, is the fact that he was traded for Chris Sale. He was traded for a guy that was on a Hall of Fame trajectory at the time, and he was really the centerpiece of that acquisition. So I feel like a lot of people placed a higher level of scrutiny on Yoan Moncada and a higher level of expectation around him than other guys that came in, even more so than guys like Eloy and Michael Kopech, because he was really that first guy. And because of the fact that outside of 2019, he has not slugged since coming to the Sox. I mean, 2019 was the only time he slugged over 412 since he's been in a White Sox uniform. And for a guy that now has transitioned to third base, which historically has always been more of a power position, that's something that just draws a lot of eyes to it. And because of the fact that he hasn't hit a ton of home runs, when you only get 14 home runs out of a
Steve, do you think if he was your second baseman that there would be different expectations? I don't think that's a question that's ever been asked on, WhiteSoxTwitter.com. But if he was a second baseman right now and you call up Jake Berger next year to play your third base, do the expectations change for Yoan Moncada?
See, I don't think so, because, again, you go back and you look at some of the scouting reports when the Sox acquired him. Jim Callis, I still remember that interview he said on The Score when he said he's Robinson Cano with more speed. He hasn't, aside from 2019, he hasn't been Robinson Cano. So I think that just lends itself to a lot of the naysayers out there not looking at the totality of what he does. So regardless of whether it's second base or third base, I don't necessarily know that.
Yeah, so I'm just going down that path of like, okay, the Sox need to sign a second baseman, right? The Sox need to sign a second baseman.
I think that ship has sailed.
I know that ship has sailed. I don't think that they're going to move him, but I think that there's a really interesting way that you solve your infield problem, and that's by versatility. If you want to talk about Chris Bryant, and Yohan Moncada hasn't really been that versatile guy, right? Like, so he played second base, but when you had a need after the Magical trade, you went out and you acquired another second baseman after Jake Berger came up and proved that he can hit fucking bombs playing third base for you while Moncada's on the shelf. You had to go out and go get another guy.
I feel like one of the things that people conveniently like to forget is Moncada, his performance at second base left something to be desired, I think, in a lot of circumstances. I think we're
talking about a guy that was also, quote unquote, an elite third baseman, Gold Glove third baseman.
The thing is,
I'm sitting there last night, man. I'm sitting there last night at like 1 a.m. on Baseball Reference looking up Nat Chapman versus Yohan Moncada stats, because if you want him to, if you're gonna die on the hill that Yohan Moncada is an elite defensive third baseman and that's where he provides the value, and then you go and look what the Gold Glover did, you are far off. You are very far off. But yes, Tony, he makes great plays. Hold
on. People need to understand the fact that there's Nolan Arenado, then there's Matt Chapman, and then there's a drop off. Okay, those two guys right there, they are in an entirely different class. Okay, it's like you've got those two, then you go Manny Machado, then there's a drop. Okay, and that's because Chapman and Arenado are just simply on a different level defensively. So I
don't call him elite, call him good.
That's okay. That's fair.
I was going to say, I feel like for a majority of Chris Bryant's career, he is like when he was playing third base full time, I thought he was at least right there with Nolan Arenado. And now he's playing outfield and can play third base. I do think Chris Bryant's a better hitter than Nolan Arenado. So
I think if you look at it from a plate approach, Bryant historically has always been a guy. He's had that sound approach. He's a guy that takes walks, works, gets himself into quality hitters counts. Arenado definitely does not have that same level of plate discipline that Chris Bryant has had historically. And then, the one thing obviously working against Nolan Arenado is always going to be the Coors Field factor. He did have, a pretty strong year offensively for your beloved St. Louis Cardinals there, Cody. But, it obviously was not, Coors Field level.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and I don't even use Coors Field as something to go against them. I just, the numbers, they're just so close.
We here in White Sox Twitter always have had the Coors Field effect. It affects how much Jerry is going to pay somebody. So, I think we might be a little more accustomed to it, even though we're an AL team, Cody. I'm just trying to give you some knowledge.
For sure. I get it. I like it. But yeah, man, I don't know about this whole thing. As far as
it's silly. Let's just call it what it is.
Yeah, it is silly. I do think if Moncada doesn't I'm not saying he has to have the same numbers in 2019, I guess, but I will say that with the hype that him and Chris Bryant came up with, that is probably why they're so polarizing. If
Chris Bryant recorded a music video, would he have been more popular?
It depends on what the music video would have been. I don't know. But he's no musician, man. He's been in Express ads because he's basically MLB's model. Best looking model, I would say.
I've always kind of equated Chris Bryant to Paul Konerko's. I mean, I don't know that you can get two more vanilla personalities than those two guys right there. And Paulie, if you got him talking about hitting, he could go a little bit, but other than that, he was just so vanilla. And I always thought that Bryant was just lacking personality entirely. You listen.
I
to
feel like that's a
post-game
thing
press-
that I feel like that's a thing that fans and even Chicago media used against him. Like,
Mhm.
and it always annoyed me because it's like these are the kinds of guys you want because at least you don't have any like off the field like distractions from this guy or anything. Like he is the kind of person you want to raise. He's got married, he's got a kid, like he's married to his high school sweetheart.
Let's
like,
also be real here. Like that doesn't create news. That doesn't create news, Cody. Like
I get it, but it also is stupid. It's still stupid, and I don't know.
You're not wrong.
No, you're not wrong because no. But here's the thing: like we're even on Tap Sportsnet, right? Like, who's gonna write the article about Chris Bryant staying at home after he just hit, a double and a home run and the Cubs win, and he, put his kid to bed at night?
Right, it's true.
Right? Like, we want Justin
Slam
Fields. We want
globers.
Justin Fields at the club dancing. Like, let's be real. Like that's the news story.
Let's be real about
That
this.
is true.
The best first round pick named Fields in Chicago sports history will always be Josh.
That's a do you know who Josh Fields is? And if you don't, I don't even blame you, Cody, because you're probably better off for not knowing who Josh Fields is.
I don't know who that is, man.
That was he was a Sox first round pick, I want to say in 2005 out of, I believe it was TCU. Or was it TCU? It was one of those schools down in Texas. I feel like it was TCU. He was also played quarterback for a little, or no, it was Oklahoma State. So, and he came up in 2007. I think he finished second of the year in rookie of the year voting. He had like 25 home runs and then just was terrible after that.
Yeah.
It was almost kind of like a Gio Soto type scenario.
I could go real deep with you about first or not even first round picks, but just like prospects that the Cubs were high on that just all really didn't pan out for like a good 10-year span. If you really wanted me to,
I mean, I feel like we could do that too.
Oh man.
Start the headline list with Gordon Beckham.
Yeah. About Felix PA. He was a top prospect with the Cubs for a while, and he didn't even give you a one good year like Gordon Beckham gave you.
Brian Anderson.
But Brian Anderson had a phenomenal stint on NBC Sportsnet, didn't he, Steve?
He did, and we also shared a Southwest Airlines flight heading back from spring training a couple of years ago. He's still jacked as hell.
Sure,
interesting. The more you know, that's an interesting story. I'd love to hear about one day with a beer.
Well, the better one was me running into Yohan Moncada at a bar in Scottsdale, or the time that.
See, I'm just more disappointed that you ran into Yohan Moncada in a bar in Scottsdale.
Actually,
and you have not yet run into Yohan Moncada at a bar in the Northwest Indiana area.
See, that's what's entertaining. Actually, Cody, I think the story you might be really interested in is the time Theo got pissed at me when I gave him an earful at a bar in Scottsdale in 2016.
Yeah, I'd actually love to hear about that, but
it's a funny story.
I feel like that's just foreshadowing for the next episode of Crosstown on Tap that we might have to bring Steve back for.
Yeah. I'll have to drag someone from Cubs on here, so I'm not going up against two Sox guys.
How about Southside Ron?
Yeah, Southside Ron would be a great guy to get on here. But I'm down to do this whenever, Cody, and whoever you want to bring from your crew in to kind of go toe to toe. We can even set up some challenge questions, get some listener interaction, all that type of stuff going.
I need to get Ron to the north side more often. That way this narrative about him is just dies, because it bothers me. I won't lie. I will admit that it bothers me. I think there was one time, what was it? He was at the playoff game and he was wearing
He was at the
White Sox
playoff game.
jersey?
He was in a Kopech jersey.
Yeah, I'm like, come on, man, just put an On Tap shirt on or something. Like, come on.
He is Southside Ron, baby.
Southside Ron.
I gave him so much crap for that. I really did.
I hope you did. I hope you did. I mean, you saw how viral the White Sox Dave John Cusack thing was. Do we have a resident John Cusack in Ron Luce at On Tap Sportsnet? I want to know.
Big if true. It'll be big if true. I guess we got to look at
I'm drawing
the
storylines here.
Someone get a hold of Bob Nightingale and have him tweet something.
I appreciate Southside Ron showing up. Steve, I think you appreciate Southside Ron.
Who doesn't love Southside Ron? Come on, he's a hell of a nice guy.
I mean, it's really hard.
He is a nice guy.
It's really hard for me to accept anybody who's bisexual like that roots for both teams. But for some reason, Ron is just in a different class because he's Southside Ron.
Well, I think, Tony, here's why I think it's different, because Ron can go to a tailgate or he can go to a game and he's not an ass bag about it. And Cody, so I'm gonna go a little bit of a tangent here. So my biggest gripe with Cubs fans in general is this whole, we don't care about the White Sox. Yet any Tuesday night game against Kansas City in like May, your people like to show up in full Cubs gear to cheer against the Sox. So this whole we don't care thing kind of doesn't hold water.
Listen, man, I think I know me and Tony kind of talked bit on this a little bit in the first episode. I think the Cubs Sox rivalry is just basically for people who were born and bred in this city or in this area. I'm from downstate, Central Illinois, where it is heavy Cubs Cardinals. I don't say that as a troll. I say that as a fact. You can go to any Dick's Sporting Goods down there, and if you go to the baseball apparel section, you'll see a large section of Cubs and you'll see a large section of Cardinals and maybe one little area of White Sox. Yeah. I don't decide that. That's just what it is.
You see that everywhere. I'm in Lockport, Illinois, and you see that.
That's wild to me though. I don't understand that.
It's because the Sox are not merchandise the way that the Cubs are, and that pisses White Sox fans off. It does. And Steve, let's be real, man. I haven't bought White Sox gear outside of Grandstand, maybe Pro Jersey Sports, or somewhere near the ballpark, unless I'm ordering it online from the official MLB shop. There is nowhere that White Sox fans go to get White Sox gear, and I'll go to the Jewel in Lockport, Illinois.
The where?
The Jewels. The Jewels down here in Lockport, Illinois. And it's the Sox are in the playoffs, and I go through the checkout line, and it's there's Cubs stuff. And I'm that makes me mad every time. It just makes me mad.
See, it all really comes back to, early 1981 when Dick Bag, Jerry Reinsdorf, and Eddie Einhorn bought the team, and then they put the team on Sports Vision at the time, which ironically they were ahead of the curve with trying to develop the regional sports network, and large portions of the Chicagoland area didn't have access to watching Sox games anymore, and the Cubs were broadcast nationally on WGN. So, you have little Billy Bob Hilljacker in Podunk, Arkansas, who gets 5 TV channels, one of which is WGN. What team is he going to root for? And so that's a big part of it. And
for sure.
I've talked about this too. For a long time, the Braves were kind of the one team in the National League I liked because when I grew up, they were on TBS. And growing up as a pitcher, and I could turn on the TV every night and watch, Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz pitch. If the Sox weren't playing well, which they typically weren't during that time frame there, aside of 93, 94, I was watching the Braves.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. All I was just saying is just the people probably coming at you or whoever or going to those games, I'm just going to assume that they all live in Chicago because who else is going to do that on a fucking Tuesday night?
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. Because I said on the last episode, I'm not going to cheer for the White Sox, but I don't hate them. And it's Tony's mission to get me to really hate them. So he can keep trying to do that. I mean, perhaps if they do sign Nick Castellanos, I guess I'll have a reason to really, really hate them. But, I just really think it's just if you're from the city, that's just what it is, and that's fine. I don't act like the rivalry doesn't exist. It's just you've mentioned already. I can't stand St. Louis. I will.
Well, and to your point there, and I kind of get into this down this rabbit hole a little bit with Tony and Johnny. I would say more so because for me, the relevance of this rivalry died on October 26th of 2005. So anybody that knows me knows that with every fiber of my being, I hate the Minnesota Twins. And the fact that I got to go, and the last memory of the Cleveland Indians baseball team was watching the White Sox celebrate a fucking Central Division title on their field, I will die a happy man because of that, because I hate those two fucking teams so goddamn much more.
You guys are more, at least to me, like Cody, I know you hate the Cardinals. Steve, you hate the Twins, you hate the Indians. There's all that animosity, interdivision. I think from more of like a business standpoint within Chicago, like you're competing for eyes, you're competing for, who your next of kin is going to grow up rooting for, right? Like whatever's popular within Chicago sports at that time kind of controls that narrative, because you want the numbers within the city. And I kind of look at it, I guess, a little bit more, tribalistic of, yeah, we've got our problems with the Twins. Yeah, we've got our problems with the Tigers. They're in a division. But the MLB can go and throw all the divisions in the league and throw it into, the ether tomorrow and change the way they scope everything. When I look at my fandom, I look at, we're in Chicago and we're sharing a market. I want people to like my team over the team that shares the same people who live in the same population as me, so that, like my next of kin will root for the same team that I do and have the same passion and pride and tradition that I did for this team. And so that's why it hits home to me. And that's why I want there to be a rivalry. I think it's extremely special that we live in a city that has two baseball teams, because it allows for that to happen. And just over the course of human nature, like, you belong to the tribe, you fight the other tribe. And I think, from Tom Ricketts and Jerry Reinsdorf, they're competing for their literal dollars versus, what an owner in Kansas City or Oakland has to do. Jerry Reinsdorf and Tom Ricketts have to compete for dollars and eyes on the TV contracts they make, on the people that show up to their ball games, to all of that stuff. I think that's why it's the most important thing. That's just me.
Yeah. I mean, this has kind of been on my mind during this conversation. I get annoyed by White Sox fans who claim the Cardinals as their National League team, because it's not like St. Louis is only a rival with Chicago in baseball. Like, the Blackhawks and the Blues are a rival. There's other reasons outside the Cubs-Cardinals rivalry that these two cities don't like each other. So to me, when I see Sox fans that are Cardinals fans too, it just kind of irks me. I won't lie, it triggers me a little bit. And then if you want me to have any hate towards the White Sox, Tony, that would be the only thing really at this point. Like, that annoys the living shit out of me, because it's like the people in St. Louis say the same things about the White Sox as they do the Cubs. So
we'll go there. Guys, this was fun. I had a lot of fun talking White Sox and Cubs baseball. Make me sick, as Johnny would say. Guys,
it's better than having to talk about the Bears.
It is better than having to talk about the Bears. Does anybody got a Bears score right now?
It's 20-6.
20-6. I'm sure Burt Drink is having a great night. Guys,
Under's looking good right now.
I've got to go talk about Jeremy Colleton no longer being the coach of the Blackhawks. If you've got anything left to say it, and we'll close this one down.
Anything else, Steve? Thanks for joining us, man.
I'm good. I appreciate you guys having me on. This was a lot of fun.
For sure. All right, I'll do my best Ron Luce and Buzz impression here, Tony. This is Crosstown On Tap, brought to you by OnTapSportsNet.com. You can follow me at Cody On Tap, Tony at Tony On Tap, and NWI Steve. You can get all your Chicago sports literature and podcasting needs. I stole that one from Buzz at OnTapSportsNet.com. Like I said, stay tuned for the next episode. I assume it's going to come out in the next week or two. So till then, guys, crack them, and we'll see you next time.
White Sox forever.
White Sox for life.
Go Cubs.